You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. This week's guests are people who reject adopting ready-made definitions, people who do their own redefining. Kimberlé Crenshaw is one of the leading activists behind the #WhyWeCan'tWait campaign, the one that's critical of the White House My Brother's Keeper initiative. And Jane Friedman saw the future and moved from print book publishing to e-publishing, all the while refusing to sacrifice literary quality. And Cristi Hegranes simply wasn't content with the way global wire services covered reality. So she built a wire service worthy of her and our respect. All three women unafraid to be redefiners. We'll get to them in a moment. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. This week, when we go inside the headlines, we have one foreign item and two domestic. The foreign one is from Tokyo. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has unveiled a new cabinet with 5 women, which is a record in Japan. There were 5 women in the Koizumi's government, but they all had minor portfolios. This is different. Among the new members are Yuko Obuchi, and she is the daughter of a former prime minister herself. She's trade minister, which is a very important post, particularly since Japan is in economic stress. The other 4 women are the new justice minister, Midori Matsushima, Erika Yamatani, who's responsible for the portfolio of Japanese abducted by North Korea, the administration and interior minister, Sanai Takaichi, and the Minister of Women's Affairs, Haruko Arimura. The Prime Minister Abe has announced his intention of promoting women because he dubs this act Womenomics, aiming to increase the proportion of women in positions of responsibility to 30% by 2020, both in public and private sectors. And he was slipping in popularity, so this will help him on the political front as well. Back home in California, 2 good news passages of legislation, one with a little bit of a caveat of irony. The first, which has no irony in it, is just a cause for celebration. It's the California State Senate has now passed a game changer, which the other house had already passed. It's SB 967, and it's called the Yes Means Yes law, because it shifts the criteria regarding consent to sexual activity. Until now, the prevailing standard has been no means no. If a woman says no, or she indicates with her body resistance, then the sex is seen as non-consensual, which is rape. And under such a standard, the enormous gray area, however, between yes and no is defined residually as yes. Uh-oh. Unless one hears an explicit no, in other words, consent is implied. Silence means consent. So the sexual harassment law took that step forward when its author, Catherine McKinnon, stipulated that any sexual attention must be welcome. Not just consensual, because consent, as we all know, can be coerced, but there hasn't been a parallel advance in sexual assault law until now. Yes means yes redefines that gray area. Silence is not consent, it is the absence of consent, and only an explicit yes can be considered consent. This is really wonderful, and you can tell how important it is because when asked by the press, a guy on a campus, college student, replied to the question, well, how will this change your behavior? And he shrugged and said, sadly, if I have to ask, I won't get what I want. So there you have it. California also passed statewide paid sick days, which is very important, particularly for low-wage jobs in which women are clustered. For example, the passage of this bill means that restaurant workers, millions of them in California, will no longer have to live in fear of being forced to work while sick or losing their job, instead of staying home to care for themselves or their families. I mean, the restaurant industry is one of the sectors in which this policy was needed the most, because 90% of restaurant workers surveyed nationally report not having paid sick days, and more than 60%, get this, report having to cook, prepare, and serve food to millions of customers while sick. That gives you pause about going to a restaurant. So California has finally joined the 9 cities that have already enacted similar policies, but we're hoping that such momentum will continue to grow. But, unfortunately, home care workers were not included in the passage of this bill. And like restaurant workers, home care workers are predominantly women in high labor-intensive, low-pay jobs, and they are routinely excluded from paid sick day protections and from minimum wage increases. So we've got to extend this now to home care workers, so that when they're taking care of other people, they also have the right to take care of themselves and their families. And now for our first guest. Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw is a prominent figure in critical race theory, and she's currently a professor at UCLA School of Law and Columbia Law School, both, specializing in race and gender issues. Kim Crenshaw was the originator of the intersectionality theory, the intersectionality of oppressions, how they interlock and overlap, and she wrote the piece on intersectionality in Sisterhood is Forever. So we go back a ways. Here's Kim Crenshaw. Kim, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been too long that we haven't talked, and not that you've been idle. You've been doing amazing things. You, of course, are the major propelling force behind the initiative about #WhyWeCan'tWait. Although we've talked about what that is on the program before, I think it never hurts to repeat, and there might be new people who haven't heard about it. So give a quick summary, first of all, of what Why We Can't Wait is and how it came to be, please.
Well, Why We Can't Wait is a formation of feminists, men and women of color and Euro-American, who have come together to encourage the White House to broaden their racial justice initiative, My Brother's Keeper, and frankly to realign it, to take it away from its focus on individual uplift and to focus instead on broad structural and institutional reasons why communities of color still lag behind European American communities on a whole range of issues, from access to education, to health, to wealth, to life itself. And so our argument, quite frankly, has been that an initiative that only deals with half the community cannot possibly attend to institutional and structural features, because they basically have exempted out from all of the ways that communities are situated just half of the people. Yeah. And those kind of initiatives that focus on half the people are actually focusing on them as individuals, framing responsibility for their own freedom as a matter of their own failings. And so our point is that My Brother's Keeper isn't really good for the community because it excludes half of them, and it isn't good for the individuals because it frames them as somehow being responsible for their own conditions.
And it's so important also because mentoring, good as that is, ain't going to do it.
Mentoring won't stop a bullet.
No.
Mentoring, won't create better schools. It won't put more money in your parent's pocket, and increasingly your parent is most likely to be a woman. Yeah. Everything we know about what includes and increases life chances of children that we do everywhere else in the world, we don't do here in the United States for our own children.
That's right. It's like Moynihan theory revisited, that you can ignore girls and women because the important thing is to get black men back in the family. Unless there's a male-headed household, you're in trouble. The problem in being implied that the difficulty that the black community has is the too many women-headed households. This makes me completely crazy.
Well, it really astonishes us because it is Moynihan. It's Moynihan on steroids because Moynihan was basically, a senator. We now have a president who's saying this, and a president who looks like most of us who are being, affected by this frame. So it has much more legitimacy than it ever had. And in addition, it has the, support of moderates and the right wing, frankly, who understand Moynihan as having basically given the formula for controlling black crime.
Yeah.
So if you understand black crime to be the product of fatherless families, then you get on board with this along with liberals who were and are opposed to mass incarceration. So it's a perfect storm for black feminist anti-racists because we've got this juggernaut that agrees that the problem is the single-headed households, not the socioeconomic status of those women.
Right. The problem's not racism or anything. The problem it's the mother's fault.
Yes.
When in doubt. So here is my question. When the tragedy hit in Ferguson, my stomach sank for a million reasons, obviously, but one of them, that after the first grief and rage hit, was, oh my God, does this mean that the Why We Can't Wait initiative, which has been trying to make it for everybody, for a sort of our children's keeper, our community's keeper, does this mean that it's dead in the water? Because what happens to men in general, we know cross-culturally, happens more in the public realm. It happens in broad daylight, and with media, if it bleeds, it leads. What happens to women, the continual, perpetual violence against women in the black community and elsewhere, but in this particular case, let's focus on the black community, happens a lot of the time in private, and so we don't even get on the radar. So tell me, please, that it's not dead in the water.
Oh no, it's not dead at all. And in some ways, Ferguson presents precisely the signpost for why we can't wait is so important for us to fully internalize. So first of all, it's absolutely true that one of the long-standing aspects of where women are situated, and women of color in particular, is deep in the private sphere.
Yep.
We take from slavery all the way to today. You had the formal institution of slavery, which was about economic work, and then you had the reproductive work of slavery that went on in the big house and in the cabins, which was also forced labor. And it's never been fully recognized, the double dimension of slavery on black women's bodies. You carry that all the way into the contemporary period where, yes, there was lynching, and yes, there were black women who were lynched, and there were also black women who were raped and thrown on the side of the road. Yeah. The difference between the two experiences is that what happens to those who are seen as in the public arena becomes representative of the race as a whole.
Yeah.
What happens to those of us who experience that and this additional dimension of oppression in the private arena is never seen as representative of the group as a whole.
Yeah.
So what's happening now is that we have an opportunity to both focus on how public policy has continued to subordinate the community as a whole, with particular ways that it subordinates African American men and some women, and the fact that when we focus exclusively on that, we miss what's going on with the rest of the community.
Yeah.
Well, so when President Obama came out and said his "My Brother's Keeper" bit in the middle of the Ferguson, that really helped the cause, truly, because people were able to see what a disconnect there was between straighten up your pants and act right and look at all this stuff that's going on in Ferguson. What you have to say has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it always boggles my mind how taking one piece of a holistic context and trying to make that one piece the generic. In this case, black male suffering equals black suffering. Oh, excuse me, there happens to be a whole other never mind.
Well, male history becomes history.
That's right.
Male biology becomes, human biology.
Yeah.
So black male suffering does become,
follows the pattern.
Black suffering. Fortunately, there is a whole new generation of activists, men, women, who are all recognizing that we cannot move forward with the anti-racism, that it's not deeply intersectional. And they're willing to put their bodies on the line. They went to Ferguson last weekend to be there, to be part of the community, and to lift up this notion that it's about all of our bodies, not just those that are gendered as male.
There's also a very encouraging there's the Beyond Ferguson campaign to urge the administration and the Department of Justice to adopt community-centered policing, especially in communities of color. I think that we were analyzing the media on Ferguson in last week's show and calling out for the follow-up, because the media leaves when something's no longer bleeding.
Right.
And the interesting stuff is now going to happen now, as the community has mobilized and registers and votes and changes that white administration. So be sure and tell the website and how people can sign on even now.
Yes, indeed, and what's coming next for
yes, please.
Why we can't wait. So one of the things that we've been doing to keep girls in the conversation is to have town halls all across the country, where girls talk about their consequences that they're facing in schools, being pushed out, in juvenile facilities. Girls are the fastest growing group with respect to gender-specific burdens to staying in school, and trafficking and foster care. These are all some of the ways where girls of color are specifically disproportionately burdened, and it's not coming up in the traditional conversations. So that's happening here in New York on October 11th, and we're also having a summit on October 31st, where all of those who have been working together on Why We Can't Wait, from those who signed the letter, from those who are leading organizations, for those who are working directly to put gender on the radar for the president and foundations, come together and talk about what a fully inclusive, anti-racist, feminist looks like. That's what we're trying to do.
This is fabulous. This is just great. And if people go to the website, what?
www. .aapf.org, African American Policy Forum.org. We are still taking signatures on the letter. We still get signatures every day from women and from men of color. So we encourage people to sign on and give us a comment about why this is important.
And find out about the activities and maybe start some in their own communities?
Absolutely. So we have tools available for individuals who want to begin a conversation. We're going to be rebroadcasting our webinar with women and with men about why we can't wait, with an addendum to discuss the implications of Ferguson with respect to that. So that will be announced, and you can register for that. And we want people to listen and engage with people around them in their homes, in the barbershops, and in their churches. Do women really matter? Are we part of our communities? No one would actually say no, but what we want to do is make sure people act in accordance to their values.
Yeah, that they walk the walk. Oh, this is wonderful. So it's hashtag Why We Can't Wait. You can find all the information at African American Policy Forum, of which Kim is the co-founder. So it's www.aapf.org. Is that right?
That's right.
That's right, and you can find all the stuff there. Oh, you're doing wonderful work as always. We're out of time, so you have to come back, because we didn't get a chance to talk about what you're writing and thinking now, because it's always interesting and way outside the box.
Well, I look forward to coming back.
Doesn't recognize a box. Okay, take care. Thanks so much, Kim.
Bye-bye.
We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And when I come back, I'll be talking with a woman who is transforming the way that you and I read books.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. My next guest, Jane Friedman, is one of the best known and most revered, frankly, women in book publishing. She was CEO of News Corp's HarperCollins, but she knew the publishing world was changing. And so she left HarperCollins in 2008 to launch Open Road Integrated Media, thereby becoming one of the first women to create an e-publisher of remarkable stature. We'll get to hear about that right away. Welcome, Jane. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Well, thank you, Robin Morgan. I'm delighted to be here with you.
You have been for years a legend in publishing, and you left an extremely powerful and respected position as CEO of News Corp, HarperCollins, to step out in the void and create Open Road Integrated Media. Tell us about Open Road and what integrated media means, and about ebooks and the way that everything is trending. Bring us up to speed.
I'd be delighted to. I was a traditional, as you said, I was a traditional publisher for many, many years, mainly a literary publisher who happened to also have a pretty good sense of business. And I was very proud of my career. I also realized that I was at a certain age and a certain time in my life when it was going to be very interesting to perhaps try something new. But what that new was a little difficult to figure out, except that it hit me in an aha moment around 2005. At HarperCollins, we were already digitizing our books. I kind of saw the future even before Jeff Bezos came up with Kindle. It seemed to me that digital was the wave of the next big thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly is. I mean, when people get scared that it will drive out traditional print books, all I can say is that when you sit on the subway, more people are reading now than ever before, it seems to me. Many are reading on tablets or on e-readers, but the ones who aren't are now reading paperback books. So it seems that once people start reading, they just start reading, which is a good thing.
The big fear was also, there were two big fears when I entered publishing many, many years ago that always continued. One was that the novel was dead, which of course I laugh at every day, and that was a truism. And the other one was that people were reading less because of lack of time and choice. And I will have to say that I think that I refuse to accept that the novel is dead, and of course
Me
it was
too.
not. But I do think that the reading level, the amount of reading that was done had started to slip. And part of it, I always felt, was because books were not that convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold comes the internet. Lo and behold comes e-reading, where you can have immediate satisfaction and gratification by pressing a button and downloading a title that you're interested in reading.
Right.
And, of course, it's less expensive because you don't have all the dramatic overheads of traditional print publishing.
Right.
That being said, the physical book is not dead along with the novel not being dead. The truth is there has to be this combination of being able to get what you want immediately. That's our generation now. And also then to perhaps buy in physical form even what you've read digitally, so that you have two libraries, a digital library and a physical library.
That's what I'm beginning to have now. Because, of course, when you travel, then that's a whole other thing, because you can bring 5 books with you.
That's right. No more broken backs.
No more broken backs.
As I said before, in the early 2000s, I started looking at digital. There was this amazing, archaic, it's probably in the Smithsonian now, it was called the Rocket ebook. It was the first e-tablet, and it was an oversized 11 by 14 or maybe 12 by 15 object. It was brilliant. The concept to me was brilliant, and I remember getting the first Rocket ebook and taking it with me on a trip, and I had all these books downloaded. Of course, the problem with the Rocket ebook, was that they couldn't get the parts, and there was no distribution. So, it was that kind of experiment, but it certainly whet my appetite.
Yeah.
So I started thinking then, as a businesswoman, we'd better check the contracts and see where digital rights exist. I knew that in 1994, when I was actually running the Knopf Publishing Group at Random House, that was when the words digital rights entered the Random House contract. So I assumed that was around the time, and lo and behold, that was. So books prior to 1994 were not, digital rights were not assigned to the publisher. So I started at HarperCollins clearing the digital rights and establishing a royalty and clearing the rights, knowing that in my mind the future was going to be digital.
The magic word being the backlist.
All the backlist, precisely. Books between 1923, which was copyright in America, and 1994. And that was the golden age of so much of publishing,
That's
particularly
true.
literary publishing.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I should just inject here, just in full disclosure, that later on this year, too early right now to announce it, but we'll hint at it. All of my backlist, that is the books that are many of which are out of print, are going to be digitalized by Open Road, and I couldn't be more delighted. But more about that later. That occurred to me to mention because backlist is the golden part of an author.
Absolutely. And backlist is, I like to call, the backbone of any kind of publishing enterprise. It also, I quote a friend of mine who used to say, a book is not backlist if you haven't read it. And I think that's a brilliant phrase because it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Open Road had the #1 bestseller on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble's Nook. And it was called Sophie's Choice.
Wow.
By William Styron, published 35 years ago.
Wow.
So I believe as a literary traditional publisher in my gut, that if you do the right kind of marketing and you present these books to the next generation, we are doing #1 a service. And then the next generation will read these books and embrace them. And our mission has really proven out, which is terrific.
And you've expanded now, too, into all sorts of other books, not only literary, right?
Absolutely. What we did, we started with literary, which is what we knew very well, and then we started looking for the right people to guide us in genre. We started looking for the categories that seem to be embraced by the digital generation and the older generation who's turned digital. And those were categories like science fiction and romance and mystery, a very big category, and military. We live in a world,
right.
As we know, where there's a war constantly.
Yeah. Jane, say a word about, explain what are enhanced books and whether they are a going thing or less so.
I do not believe in enhanced books, really, and I'll tell you why. And I also put a caveat on that by saying that I don't believe in it now, and one never knows what's going to happen. But when we first started Open Road, we used video as very much a part of our marketing plan, and we had wonderful producers who would do really mini documentaries on the authors. They were not trailers, and we use them as part of our marketing through social media, etc., which is very important. Enhanced books is different. Enhanced books is where you actually have multimedia within the book itself.
Right.
And we did a few books that way, including a Bob Marley book where we had some music. The truth is that the consumer who wants to read.
And one last quick question. There seems to be a dialogue going on as to whether tablets will replace e-readers or not, or whether we have both and. What's your take on that?
I think we are a consumer society, and I think that we will have both. I think that the notion of the tablet, which is really kind of brilliant because you can do everything on that tablet,
Right.
is fabulous. I think. I mean, I don't believe the way some of the skeptics believe that people won't read on the tablet because they will find something else to do. A pop-up will come up and say, do this crossword puzzle. But I think that having everything at one's hands in one device is excellent. On the other hand, I do not think the e-reader will go away for a while. I think that there still will be the dedicated e-reader. And I always look at the people who come to my house or who I socialize with who are not in the book business, but I look to see what they are using. Yeah. And for the most part, everybody's got two. Now that, of course, means that what's going to happen is that these devices are going to have to get less expensive.
Right.
And my hope is that there will be some fabulous benefactor, who will just who will just help to reduce the price. Because having started the audiobooks business for the publishing industry years ago, we had this complete surge when, going back years ago, when the Walkman became $9.99.
Right.
So in a sense, I feel like the tablets, the e-readers will have to come down to a mass market price because I do think people will own multiples.
That's good to know. Oh, we have to go, regrettably, but I have to tell you, it is such a delight that there is a woman on top of this major new media universe, and a delight to me as a reader as well as a writer that our values, our literary values, our love of the word lives on and in fact can reach even more people. So thank you for what you're doing, my dear, and also thank you for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
It has been a delight, and I thank you.
Now let's glance at some news you can use. Well, first, the bad news. More bad news. Well, maybe this isn't bad news. Maybe if you've been experiencing this yourself and thought you were somehow all alone, this will be good news because, although it's bad news, you'll know that you weren't alone or something. In any event, if you're a scientist, this may be useful to you. The journal PLOS 1+1 on July 16th published a report. Catherine Clancy, an anthropologist at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and 3 colleagues used email and social media to invite scientists to fill out an online questionnaire about their experiences with sexual harassment and assault at field sites, and they received 666 responses, 3/4 of them from women, from 32 different disciplines, including anthropology, archaeology, biology, and geology. And almost 2/3 of the respondents said they had been sexually harassed in the field. More than 20% reported being sexually assaulted. Students or postdoctoral scholars and women were most likely to report being victimized by superiors. Very few respondents said their field site had a code of conduct or sexual harassment policy, and of the 78 who dared report incidents, fewer than 20% were satisfied with the outcome. So, given the anecdotal and voluntary nature of this, quote, research, neither aspect of it, neither the sexual discrimination or the sexual harassment and assault can be expected to, tell us the true incidence of either among scientists and science writers, but the volume of responses tells us something unmistakable. So if you've been feeling that it only happened to you, pick up a copy of PLOS 1. If you're a scientist, you must know the journal in your field and feel at least less alone. Or you might drop a line to Catherine with a Y, Catherine Clancy, an anthropologist at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and tell her thank you, and she's not alone. It's time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back talking about the world's first highly professional, high-standard, global wire service for news, and it's run totally by women. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. In 2006, Cristi Hegranes was a young journalist, a foreign correspondent, working in Nepal, and realizing with some discomfort that she didn't feel she had the cultural context or the language or the texture to really do justice to her stories. Out of that grew an idea, and then a second, and then a third, and she has created a miracle from all three. Cristi Hegranes. Welcome, Cristi, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, you have done an extraordinarily interesting thing here. So I'm reading about this global press service, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really good stuff all over the world. Interesting that all of their reporters seem to be women. And then I read a little more, and there's a global press journal, and there's a training process for an institute training these reporters all over the world who are from the countries that they're reporting on. That's a refreshing perspective for a change. And I'm noticing that all that is women too, but nowhere does it say this is the first women's wire service, global wire service. And I'm thinking, wow, they're positioning themselves as the generic, just the way the boys do. Is that, oh, and I hear your snicker. Is it for that reason, or to come in under the radar so they don't think, ooh, yuck, women, or it's very clever?
Well, thank you so much. You know, the original concept was the Global Press Institute, which was founded 8 years ago. And when I started the Global Press Institute, the premise was relatively simple: flip the model of foreign correspondence on its head and start to tell real stories from developing media markets, particularly the places that tend to get very lumped into the mainstream media's war, poverty, disaster, disease storytelling cycle.
Exactly. Flies on their eyes is the way I always think of it. You show you show babies with flies on their eyes. Go on.
Absolutely. So, you know, it just made the most sense to me that, first of all, I've always believed that journalism is one of the world's most extraordinary development tools. But particularly in the hands of women, it has the opportunity to do a lot of things. Number one, when local women are trained and employed in a dignified position of literate leadership like journalists, their own personal life indicators skyrocket dramatically. But what's also different is the types of stories that they're able to tell, and the source access that they have is dramatically different for men, and even more dramatically different than foreign men, foreign correspondents.
Absolutely.
Which by and large tend to be men.
Absolutely.
So over the years, we've grown from just the Global Press Institute to the Global Press Journal, which is our publication platform. So every single woman who graduates from our training program at the Institute receives an offer of full or part-time employment from the Global Press Journal.
My God.
And so that went on for several years. And then last year, we were just too inundated with requests for one-off syndication requests for our work. So we created the Global Press News Service. And as you rightly picked up on, it's not a branded women's initiative for a couple of reasons. One is because it doesn't need to be. Mm-hmm. Our journalism that we're producing is absolutely a world-class journalism product. It's some of the best international news that exists anywhere.
It is. Our
standards of fact-checking and rigor and just uniqueness and depth of storytelling, I believe, speaks for itself. That to label it a gendered initiative seems to limit its potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I would absolutely be lying if I said there wasn't a component that made it more difficult to syndicate when you said this is a women's product, because people assume it's agendaed or advocacy journalism in some way, which it absolutely isn't.
Well, at least it isn't any more so than the status quo is, which is gendered male.
Sure.
Go
So
on.
it's a journalism product that we're extraordinarily proud of, and the women of Global Press Institute Journal and News Service around the world are some of the best journalists that exist. And most of the women who come into our program have no prior experience. So they're coming from real depth community perspectives, and they're going through an extremely rigorous, long training program, learning how to use their innate skills for the purpose of journalism. They're learning how to use their own voices on behalf of their communities. And through the Journal and the News Service, those voices and stories are going global.
Well, and this is just dynamite, because you must be doing awfully good training, and they must be working awfully hard, because I'm looking at the list of prizes already. Starting in 2010, the Journalism Innovation Prize awarded to the Global Press Institute, which is the Society of Professional Journalists, and an Excellence in International Journalism, a number of those. To reporters writing from Nepal, from Zimbabwe, from Uganda, from Cameroon. This is just, where did you come from with this idea?
So I founded Global Press Institute when I was 25 years old, as my mother likes to say, young enough to know not to know better. After a short experience as a stringer working abroad, covering the Civil War in Nepal. Mm-hmm. And it was everything I had always wanted to do, travel the world telling stories. But it didn't take long after I was on the ground when I realized that these were not my stories to tell.
Right.
And that, frankly, I was not the right person to be telling them. Access as a foreign correspondent can be so extraordinarily limited.
Right.
Language barriers, government-appointed translators, fixers, all of these barriers that I didn't see as tools to help me do my job. I saw it as barriers between me and the truth.
You're absolutely right.
And so I started, just looking around at local women in the communities I was covering, and realized that I had just two things. I had professional journalism training, and my work was appearing in credible publications. Mm-hmm. But the women in these communities had everything that I needed and wanted to actually do my job well, which was local source access, no language barrier, the trust of the community, real social, cultural, historical, political context to bring to a storytelling discipline.
Exactly.
So that became the goal, is that I would take what I had, this journalism training and credible global platform, and figure out a way to put those two things in their hands.
And then was your life thereafter taken over by fundraising, or how did you get how did you get this off the ground?
I think that's the dirty secret that nobody tells you when your dream actually becomes a reality. Fundraise for a living.
Yeah, exactly.
So in 2006, March of 2006 is when the organization was officially founded, and we launched our first pilot program in Chiapas, Mexico. And I raised that money by literally asking every person who had the poor misfortune of knowing me for $40. And raised $10,000 that way, launched the program. By the end of 2006, we had earned our first $50,000 grant. And over the last 8.5 years, the organization has grown at a very reasonable pace. I'm a big believer in step-by-step growth. Mm-hmm. And the biggest jump for us has been with the Global Press News Service, which will, over the course of the next 5 years, become a sustainable social enterprise that will keep the Institute and the Journal sustainable as well. So we'll stop the over-reliance on granting and philanthropic trends. Wow. And we've been able to attract a wide variety of supporters and subscribers to the Global Press News Service, and we're also very fortunate to have the support of some wonderful foundations like the MacArthur Foundation that makes the news service possible.
I feel like I've died and gone to heaven. No, really, because for a long time, when I was editor-in-chief of Ms. In the early 90s, I established a policy. We did a lot of international news because that was my special love. I was told that I was being, too picky by insisting that unless absolutely unavoidable, our coverage of a country would always be done by a woman journalist from that country. And everybody thought I was crazy, but we had a different kind of coverage then in terms of subject matter, tone, cultural context, all the things that you listed. That was brilliant. And I thought, gee, am I the only crazy person who thinks this makes a difference in coverage? And of course, I'm not. You're crazy too.
Absolutely. I've been told that more than a few times.
Well, to tell the website for right now before we forget for all these things, so people can go there, donate support, avail themselves of all this talent. Tell how they can find you.
So the best place to find us and to read our news coverage is the Global Press Journal, which is the home of all of our news content. And not only will you find just amazing news stories there, it's also a completely solicitation-free space. You're not going to find any donate buttons, advertisements, or anything. It is a website that is designed on one of our core values, which is free access to information. If you want to learn more about the training and how the training piece of the Institute works, it's globalpressinstitute.org. And then for any folks interested in subscribing to the news service, that's globalpressnewsservice.com.
And I would add that these stories, although some of them indeed are especially relevant to feminist consciousness and to the women's movement, a piece on child rights in Rwanda, a piece on gender-based violence in Zambia. There is also an award in excellence in epilepsy reporting from the International Bureau of Epilepsy, and that's awarded to Comfort Musa, who is one of your reporters from Cameroon. So This is a world vision that you're depicting, but it is that alternate reality that is inhabited not by pale males reporting to the New York Times.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that makes our coverage most unique that has nothing to do with gender is that no reporter for the Global Press Journal ever receives an assignment. I remember the feeling of getting an assignment from an editor who was 10,000 miles away from me, who just really had no idea what was happening in this community. And so every single reporter for the Global Press Journal, there's 136 of them actively working in 26 countries around the world right now. They come up with all of their own story ideas with their local story coaches and editors. There's translators and fact checkers, all in these very vibrant local news desks. So as a result, we get extraordinary depth and diversity of storytelling. And like you said, not just related to women-specific topics, but we do incredible business and enterprise coverage. We have a new series on mental health that just launched a couple of weeks ago that you can find on the Global Press Journal, and another global series about food security coming out in October as well.
Brilliant. Well, we always say all issues are women's issues, and you're
absolutely. So
you're covering women's issues in that sense to a T. Thank you so much, Cristi, for this idea, for this reality. You want to go, listener, to globalpressnewsservice.com or globalpressjournal.com or globalpressinstitute.org, and they will all take you to a kind of coverage that you don't get anywhere else. Thank you again, and thanks for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. I hope you'll come back many times.
Thank you so much, Robin. It was a pleasure. I'd love to.
We need to take one last break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still, with amazing consistency, Robin Morgan. We'll be right back, and we'll have some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back just in time for Fighting Words. It's the stories you don't hear about that are even more distressing than the stories you do. For example, there's been very little or no reporting on the treatment of women in the swath of terror and control that ISIL has carved out across the Middle East. But in villages that have been, quote, liberated by various government troops or Kurds, there is a consistent pattern. Women are found crucified to trees, naked, having been repeatedly raped by ISIL fighters. It appears the fighters are, quote, rewarded by being allowed to have their way with captured women. We don't get coverage of this. It's perhaps not considered important. We get a lot of the beheadings of men. We get other coverage. We do not learn about the imposition of Sharia law or the hijab or these crucifixions and gang rapes. Now, when a story is ignored or overlooked because it's considered unimportant, or it's just merely half the human species, or we're used to that. But there's a new wrinkle occurring now, which is dastardly on a number of fronts. It's the story in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, England, where it impinges on racism and sexism in a horrific knot. We're so used to white violence on people of color that this stands the world on end. What happened was that 1,400 young white girls were raped and abused violently by gangs of Pakistani men between 1997 and 2013. The local government and the police were all part of the Labour Party. And there was a great fear that somehow this would validate the right wing in their continual crusade against the Pakistani community, against people of color, against immigration. But the report nonetheless detailed horrific abuse. Children had been doused in petrol, in gasoline, and threatened with being set alight if they told. They'd been threatened with guns. They'd been made to witness brutally violent rapes of other children. They were threatened that they would be next if they told anyone. And the reports that were done by women in the community from 2002 to 2006 highlighted the exploitation of children and the links to wider criminality, but nothing was done for fear it would endanger multicultural politics, for fear it would turn into even greater backlash against the Pakistani community. Now, this is what happens when a feminist analysis is not present. First of all, what seems evident to me is that if these men did this on girls of another community, they first practiced on girls of their own, which nobody even reported or noticed or cared, and if it was reported, it went completely into the invisible bin. Secondly, why would we be afraid to report something which men do? Not just Pakistani men, but which men do. For example, it takes different forms in different communities. If you're in Ireland or in Boston, it was Catholic priests. If you're in the world of sports and football, it was Joe Paterno. If you're in an elite school in Manhattan on the Upper East Side, it was elite teachers in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. If you're in Hollywood and celebrities, it was Roman Polanski. The point is that wherever you look, you find men of different ethnic and religious backgrounds, some, even politicians, who victimize women and girls. And if that is your analysis, then you're not afraid to prosecute the Pakistani men who did this, the gang who did this. But if you don't have that analysis, then all you can react to is the fear of racism, and the fear of racism is so great in that particular community at that particular moment, and the Labour Party's abstract political position on racism, that they actually wind up acting in a racist manner. Meanwhile, little girls, 1,400 of them, were traumatized for life, assaulted in bus stations, in alleyways. There was one little girl who saved her soiled and bloodied clothes as evidence for the police and brought it to the police, and the police gave her a check for £140 as recompense for her garments, and then managed to lose and misplace and never find the evidence. So this is a shocking mark against the Labour Party and against what I would call false consciousness on racism and no consciousness on sexism at all. And that's it for this week. Remember to visit us at WMClive.com for the archive of all our previous episodes. And be sure to find us on Facebook, Twitter, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, Senior Producer, Crystal Williams-Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next week when we'll learn how the new push for more women to be on corporate boards may very well change the culture and the bottom line of the financial world. And in a conversation with Nina Khrushcheva, we'll try to decode Vladimir Putin's bare-chested manhood messages to keep them and a U.S. response to them from devolving back into a Cold War. Last, Wendy Davis, filibustering Texas legislator in pink sneakers, who's now running for governor of Texas, will be here to talk about all that and her new book, aptly named Forgetting to Be Afraid. Only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMClive.com. Talk radio with a brain.